Mark, glad to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be back.
It was always good to see you and get to spend time with you. And I'm very much looking forward to May 15th and 16th, where we get to spend a little bit of time together at the Shift Experience and have you come inspire and get all the attendees just fired up and ready to go.
Well, that's going to be a great event with so many great resources and speakers. And I know I've been privy to the plans that you and Peter have been making, and it really will be unlike almost any other event anyone's been to, because it's going to cover things in a different way. It isn't going to just be a network and be entertained by speakers. I'm sure and certainly hope that the speakers are entertaining, but more importantly than that, they're going to engage and educate. So it'll be a great show.
Yeah, it'll be a blast, and we're having you, I know, kick off on day one and get everything going after Peter and I kind of introduce what this whole thing is about on May 15th. But, you know, I got a couple questions for you, because I want to make sure everyone attending just knows a little bit about you. You were on the podcast a few months ago, so really dove deep, and I'll put a link to that one as well for those of you who want to dive into some of your books and stuff like that.
All right.
We want to climb into your mind a bit more today and just ask you some questions, just to kind of hear more of your perspective on how you've got to kind of where you're at, and you know, honestly, things you've struggled with and how you've overcome them, because this is what this conference is about. How do we shift our mindset? How do we shift our nutrition and health? How do we shift our business? How do we kind of shift it to that next level, depending where everybody's at? But out of the gate, Mark, what gets you so fired up and excited to do what you do on a daily basis?
Well, one of the themes that's developed in my work over 30 plus years is that nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. Extraordinary is a choice. And we all have ordinary lives. We all have the same number of hours and minutes in each day, but it's obvious that how we choose to use those hours and minutes is the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. And even if you didn't grow up in an environment where you were encouraged or taught or rewarded for your attempts to be extraordinary, you can still do it. And I have found that as many or more people become extraordinary despite their bad circumstances than they do because of their good circumstances. So I look at a lot of different aspects of success. And at the Shift Conference, I'm going to be talking about the power of preparation, because I believe most games are won or lost before either team takes the field. It's about who has prepared and practiced best. And the game is just proof of which team has done that. So that's going to be one of the sub-themes about how to be extraordinary. And I'm going to apply it to each of those four areas. We can talk a little bit about those four areas that the Shift Experience is going to cover.
Yep. No, and I think that's great. I was always talking, speeches and coaching that I do as well, about that whole phrase that luck favors the prepared. Right. And, luck, in my opinion, doesn't have anything to do with it. It's all about that preparation. Right. Yeah. And there's a little luck involved. But
I think the bigger point there is that we kind of create a lot of our luck. There's no upside in blame. It doesn't. Usually blaming makes us feel worse, not better. And it doesn't improve our situation. I'm reading a book about self-awareness, and I apologize that I don't recall the author's name, but she says something interesting in the book. And I'm a big believer in reflection and introspection, but she says that rumination is the evil opposite of reflection, because rumination focuses on why we got a bad break, what's wrong with us. It rehearses and it replays the negative. And the true introspection should focus not on the why, but on the what. What do we do? Because we may never know why. I mean, life is wonderful, but it's not always fair. I've always said anybody that thinks life is fair hadn't lived very long, because sometimes bad stuff happens that you don't deserve. Actually, I've always said, I hope we don't deserve all the bad stuff that happens, because if we deserve it, we're wickedly bad people, right?
Yes.
Bad stuff happens. But if we dwell too long on the why, we don't move to the what. And the what is what moves us. It gives us an action plan. It gives us an orientation about what we need to do to get past whatever we're dealing with.
That's huge. And, at the conference, we're going to be talking about those 4 B's, as we call them, right? So body, our brain, our business, and our bond. So obviously a body is, we're having a nutritionist come talk. We're having these fitness influencers come run a workout as part of it, right? So kind of taking care of our energy levels. When we talk about our brain, it's our mindset, right? A lot of this preparation. How do we not ruminate? How do we instead reflect and move forward? We're talking about business growth, right? So you may be working for a corporation, right? But you're growing, you're developing, you're, ultimately running a business. The same thing is true if you're a business owner, you're going to be in attendance as well. But how do we kind of take that business to the next level, or our career? And then finally, that bond piece, right? Our relationships. So the bond that we have with other people, how do we make sure they are rock solid, that we surround ourselves with all the right people, things like that. So with those kind of 4 B's in mind, what is one area like in the past that, of those 4 B's where you've personally like struggled, that something you've worked through, and how did you kind of overcome one of those?
Sure. Well, let me just preface what I'm about to say with my belief. I think it all starts in the brain, but it all manifests through the body. It's hard to live a high performance life in a low performance body.
Yes.
Nobody has to be fit or healthy or in shape. I can't control that I'm 60, but I can control how healthy I am at 60.
Yes.
I'm not one of those people who denies the inevitable aging process, but a lot of what we've learned about aging, frankly, is wrong. First of all, we used to believe that the plasticity of the brain, which enables us to grow and learn, basically stops at some age in the 40s or 50s, but that's not true. The brain is still plastic, but it's harder to learn and grow. So we have to be very attentive and not give up on that. Jack LaLanne, one of my all-time heroes, was a guy that exercised many hours a day into his 80s. And, he was a guy who proved that you don't have to be less fit because you get older. So I think it all starts in the brain. It manifests in the body. We as leaders get things done through people. That's the bond, or as I like to tease Peter, Bond, James Bond. That's the connection part. And then all of that can grow or add to our business. When I've struggled in all those, I don't know anyone who hasn't struggled in all those areas, but I think back to the fact that growing up, I was an overweight kid, had no athletic ability. And in college, made a discovery. I started running basically to lose weight, to become more fit.
Sure.
And as I did that, I realized that truth is transferable, that the same discipline I used to be fitter and a better runner, I could use to be a better speaker, a better student, a better whatever.
Yes.
So I started running and really enjoyed it. And at 60, I don't run it as much for the simple reason that I don't have as much cartilage and cushion left in my knee. Probably because I was running 10 or 12 miles a day in my 20s, I probably have a little less than I would normally have in my 60s. But I'll never forget, I entered a race, my first race, and I entered it with some friends, actually a guy I'm still friends with these many years later. Mm-hmm. And I trained, I didn't know much about racing. I think it was a 5-miler or maybe a 10K. I can't remember the distance.
Yes.
And at the beginning of the race, my friend and some of his friends said, "Hey, don't start in the front, man. That's where all the fast people are. Stay in the back with us. We have more fun." Well, he was my friend, and so I started in the back with them, and they ran really slow. They hadn't trained or taken it very seriously, and I spent the entire race passing slower runners. Mm. And I remembered something that has served me to this day, and that is I would never let someone else determine how I ran my race. Because I was prepared, they weren't. And that's fine. They wanted to have fun. I wanted to see how good I could be, right? I wanted to be as competitive. I wasn't competitive enough to finish in the top spots, but I was a whole lot more competitive than my results showed because I let somebody else, with good intentions, by the way, he wasn't trying to mess me up. He was just a buddy. He said, "Hey, don't take it so seriously." Yes. And I think that's such a good lesson because we often become victims to, as kids, we call it peer pressure, but we just become victims to culture pressure, peer pressure. We don't say or post something we believe because we think somebody else will disagree. And at the end of the day, you got to determine how you run your race. And if you let somebody else run your race, ultimately it's not your race anymore.
I love that. It was interesting. I interviewed this guy, Mark Allen. So ESPN named him the greatest endurance athlete of all time. And it was really interesting. So we talked about that point of his turning point from losing. I mean, finished anywhere from second to fifth. So losing, like those big Ironmans, he lost 6 in a row. I mean, still second to fifth. Come on, that's pretty darn good, right?
I'd take that any day.
I know, I say that in jest, but he lost 6 in a row, and then he went and won 6 in a row. And his turning point, he talked about his mindset shift was that he, instead of focusing on how all those other people were going to run their race, He instead focused on, how do I run my best race, have my best strategy, my best mile, my best stroke, like all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That was the turning point for him. So I love that. I love that story you told, kind of that discipline, not letting others determine kind of your strategy. And that's what we're excited about, the shift of like getting like people, like individuals like you in the room who've built a fabulous business, impacted, I don't even know how many tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of lives over your career. And to have you in the room surrounding yourself with other like-minded people, I think is massive. That's what I'm most excited about, is they get to interact with you and all the other speakers that are going to be there.
Oh yeah, me too. By the way, I just want to interject something that I didn't realize until much later in life. I kind of was onto it when I was a runner, but fatigue happens first in the mind before the muscles. And so your brain will tell you you're tired before you really are tired. There is muscle fatigue, no doubt about that.
Yes.
When I was a runner, my favorite part of running was the hardest part of running. And that was if I was running a 10 miler at mile 7, when my body, I thought it was my body, but it was my brain said, pull over, lay down, wait until they come. Whoever they were, the ambulance, friends with a stretcher, somebody with a wheelchair. And I had to override that. And I found out, and it's so simple, it's so simple, but so powerful, that you can choose to say no. You can say, I'm going to keep going. Now, when real muscle fatigue sets in, and I saw a moving moment when just recently, I think in the Boston Marathon, I saw a clip where a soldier's legs gave out. He couldn't stand, but he crawled on his hands and knees to finish. Did you see that? I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that, yes.
And people wanted, and people were great. They wanted to help him. And he said, no, I want to do this myself. Boy, there's no better example of how the mind can override the body, because he really was unable to stand. His muscle, his slow and fast twitch fiber said, but he crawled across the finish line. And that's a real testament to the power of the brain.
So true. It's so true. Well, and I know that's what I love about what you do, because you touch on all those 4 Bs that we're going to be talking about during the event, and it's applicable to everything. I can't wait to hear kind of your speech and stuff like that, and your talk. And most importantly, the exercise we actually take people through after you're done. So it's not just like, hey, come here, Mark, speak, and it's going to be great. And we'll keep expectations high. But
go home and eat a quart of ice cream at the end.
It's right. It'll be great. One kind of question that I wanted to ask you as well. Obviously, you've been doing what you do for a long time, and you've experienced great success. Was there one moment that was kind of the tipping point for your business, where all of a sudden, like, I don't know, just things started to line up and happen, right, as they say, right? And I realize it's probably not a moment, but was there something as you look back and reflect on that, like when you made this decision, when you started doing this differently, when you started, I don't know, doing something that was the tipping point that just escalated your business?
There have probably been a few. I think at a professional level, when my book, The Fred Factor, became a bestseller, that added to my momentum, which, I've been speaking. The book came out in 2004, and I started speaking back in 1987. So that was, your typical 15-year overnight success.
Yes.
Or longer. But I think that my entire strategy, as simple as it sounds, having grown up on a farm, I realized that I always could control how hard I worked. And I was fortunate, and I mean this now. Back then, I don't think I would have used the word fortunate, that nobody ever asked me if I wanted to work, was in the mood to work, could work, would work. They just said, time to go, and we went out and worked. And that was a great way to grow up, because then when I became a speaker, I quickly learned there were a lot of people older, smarter, better looking, more talented, fill in the blanks. But the one thing I always controlled was how hard I worked. So I always busted my hump, whether it was a paid speech or a free speech, for the simple reason that when you speak, people form impressions of you and whether or not they want to do business with you. They don't say, well, he got paid a lot of money, so I'm going to be more discerning than he's speaking for free. I don't really care. They care always when you're in front of them or in front of an audience, whether you're a sales professional or a professional speaker. So I just hustled to always do a good job. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about at the SHIP conference is to put myself in the place of maximum opportunity. If you isolate, if you don't go out, if you're not engaged with customers in the marketplace, good things don't happen because they don't have the opportunity to happen. Now, that's only half the equation, and I'm going to share the other half of the equation in May. But I worked very hard, and I never all I ever wanted to do, and maybe this was a character defect, maybe I didn't aspire high enough, all I ever wanted to do was become a very successful full-time professional speaker. I wrote to help build my speaking business, and I knew the odds of writing a best-selling book were so astronomically bad that I didn't set out to write a best-selling book. I set out to write the best book I could write, and fate and a little luck and circumstance enabled the book to become a bestseller. So I'm grateful for that. But if my book hadn't been a bestseller, I don't think today I would look back and feel, I'm grateful and happy as it can be, but I don't think I'd feel, how can you be remorseful about something you didn't know could happen, right? So I think there's two lessons there, and that is whatever happened has brought me to where I am. Whatever happened has brought you to where you are, and everyone that's listening. But that ultimately we influence that by doing things that are very simple, hard to do, but simple, and that is working really hard, doing the right things. Working really hard, by the way, doing the wrong things doesn't help. And just being out there. I always say when you talk about luck favors momentum, I use the analogy that it's better to be splashing around in the waves than sitting on the beach if you're trying to learn to swim.
Yes.
Sitting in the sand won't make you a better swimmer. Now, splashing around in the waves may not make you a great swimmer, but it's the first step. You're in the water, and you can start to build on that.
Yes. And I love that analogy, and it's I cannot wait for the second half of the formula here on May 15th and 16th. And for you listeners, I don't know what it is yet, so I'm on the edge of my seat as you will be on May 15th and 16th. Mark, I thank you so much for coming on. I know you knew this was going to be kind of short and sweet, and I just wanted to share a few stories with the listeners today. And I actually learned some new things about you that I didn't know before, which is awesome. That's why I love having people back on the podcast. So
it's always a treat. Love working with you. Look forward to being with you May 15th and 16th at the Shift Experience. So thanks for having me on the show again.
Love it. Thanks so much, Mark.
You bet.
Awesome.
Cool.